Welcome to Pitch It To Me podcast, a show about the subjective past, present, and potential future of flesh and blood design. I like Dromai like I like my steaks. Done. Well done, that is. Today's episode will be a retrospective look at the Draconic Illusionist hero now that she's rotated out of Classic Constructed. On Red Pitch, Clark will investigate if the Riptides were right about Dromai all along. On Yellow Pitch, Joel will pick apart illusionists and board states. And on Blue Pitch, Fuzzy will share his new Dromai design, Dromai, Empress of Ash. You can find us across all socials such as TikTok and Instagram at Pitch It To Me Podcast. I'm Joel.
I'm Fuzzy.
And I'm Clark.
Thanks to everyone who participated in our custom card design contest. Last episode, we announced the winners, so if you haven't heard that yet, go back and check that one out. It was honestly really heartwarming to see how many people tuned in for our live premiere where we announced the winners. And altogether, this experience was really rewarding.
Yeah, there were a lot of great responses. I don't feel like anyone's really been nitpicking anything either, which makes me feel like we did a good job, which is nice. Yeah, it was really cool to see all the designs, all the engagement, all the positive responses, the different threads that were made in the Discord afterwards. It was a really great time, and we really enjoyed doing this.
Yeah, and be sure to let us know in the Discord if you have any ideas for other contests or community engagement stuff we can do. We're always on the lookout to show our appreciation for our community.
Moving on a little bit to recent events. Zachary Wallach, one of PQ+. Let's go! We know that guy!
Yeah, the PTI event / PQ+ in San Francisco this weekend.
Big shout outs to Zachary Wallach. Not only is he a local, he also won our second place for the hero specialization design.
And I think prior to the PQ win, the PQ+ win, he also won a PQ on Dromai as well. It was the very last PQ you could win with Dromai still being legal.
Yeah, so his name got on the honor roll for the hero that really sort of made him. Mm-hmm. And then he showed that he wasn't just a Dromai one trick. He picked up Prism and very quickly won a very large tournament with the Prism list.
He really understands Illusionist.
He's so good, dude.
Yeah.
We're so lucky to have someone like Zach in our local community.
Mm-hmm.
Also, big check-in for these past couple weekends. Teklovossen and Riptide got some wins, which, always makes me think of my favorite movie, Ratatouille. And the Chef Gusteau's eternal words, anyone can cook.
And boy, have they been cooking.
They've been cooking this whole time. But now is the first time where they could actually play and not be harassed by...
Well, I think finally Teklovossen... Well, Teklovossen didn't have the worst matchup into Dromai as far as I'm aware.
No, it was pretty bad.
It was pretty bad? Okay. I knew he had a lot of poppers, but I knew it was also hard for him to clear dragons. But I think now there's not a single hero in Classic Constructed that doesn't have Living Legend points.
Oh, really?
I think Teklovossen was the last holdout.
Cool. Well, with all that out of the way, should we move on to our red pitch?
Joel, do you want to talk about what this episode's going to be about?
Yeah. Dromai's gone.
Yeah, Dromai's gone.
Yeah, we usually like to take this opportunity when a hero hits Living Legend to talk retrospectively about the lessons that we learned about the game along the way thanks to this hero. And then at the end, we also like to give our design for what a potential new replacement for that hero could be.
This is the only time that we could release this episode, because right after this, spoiler season is going to take off for Mistveil. We're probably going to be talking a lot about Mistveil, limited for Mistveil. Whenever a new set release, we always have 4 or 5 different episodes we like to make about it. So we're going to get inundated with that. We wanted to give Dromai the time that she deserves now before all of that gets started.
So Clark, why don't you start us off with Red Pitch?
Oh yeah, I guess I am Red Pitch. So for Red Pitch, I wanted to ask the question, was Dromai broken? Because every single Riptide player, and we certainly talked to a lot of them, said that Dromai was completely broken. And I think a lot of Illusionist haters also said that Dromai was just broken. But was she? One thing that I noticed about Dromai is that she was never really the top dog that was controlling the entire meta. But she was getting points in every single meta, regardless of who was the top dog. I remember distinctly my very first big tournament was it Nationals in Las Vegas? In that, people were saying that was a Lexi meta, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like Lexi was queen, and maybe Icelander had some play into her. And then somehow Dromai kept getting points and showing up in the top tables.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's really notable that like, and people were even saying like Dromai's not good in the meta because the Lexi specifically has such a good matchup into Dromai.
I feel like she was always still top tier though. Like you had Lexi at the top for sure. Dromai always like hovering nearby, right? Like being a contender without being the S tier deck.
Exactly. And I think that that was really the story of Dromai throughout the years. Never the top dog, but always getting points.
1.5 princess.
Yes. And I think that that's a very interesting place. I don't know if we've seen many other heroes sort of occupy that space before.
I think part of the reason that Dromai has that hover effect is the difficulty it takes to pick up the hero. Like if you think of KO kind of being like, he kind of had a flash in the pan as being like the best deck in the format for a little bit, or like the prospective best deck. He's also a really easy hero to pick up, right? Like at the early parts of the format, a really good player like Yuki Lee Bender can pick up this deck like KO, win this entire event off of it, partially due to the ease of access to the skill ceiling, right? Like Dromai takes a lot of practice and reps and effort in order to really hammer out all the different play lines that you can do. The skill expression on the hero is so much higher, and you need that skill expression in order to do well with Dromai, that it has this barrier of entry that I think affects the metascape in an interesting way.
Yeah, the people who practiced Dromai and got good on Dromai didn't really want to get off Dromai and go play someone else.
But also it's hard to get on, you know? Like you're saying the people who are playing Dromai are less likely to leave her. Mm-hmm. But I'm also kind of saying the opposite is true, that if Dromai seems to be a really solid deck in the format, it's hard for really good players to just hop on Dromai and see success with her. Even if she's the best deck, even if you're the best player.
Oh, I see what you mean. The skill floor is so high on Dromai. There's a reason why she was never like 60 to 70% of the meta share, because she was too hard to pick up.
Yeah.
So that gave her this constant feeling of being like not the biggest deck.
Yeah.
Not because she wasn't the strongest deck, but because even if she was, it would have taken too much time and practice for enough players to pick her up to make her the biggest share in the meta.
Right.
Yeah.
Like it was probably a lot easier to switch to Lexi during that meta instead of like playing Dromai. And that's why a lot of people for Dromai's entire life cycle said, oh yeah, she sucks. She's not a very good deck, because like very few people were actually playing her well at a high enough level.
Yeah, what was it, Joel? You were saying that they just gaslit us every single meta.
No, literally every chance they got, no, Dromai sucks. She's the worst out of that set.
And then she always ends up with some big win, some big showing, and then everyone's like, wait, I thought Dromai sucked this meta.
Yeah.
Maybe it was just us being gaslit the entire time. There's a secret Dromai Discord where they were just like, all right, guys, this is the messaging. We can't win this meta because of roll the roulette wheel. Brutes are good now.
Yeah.
We can't win because brutes are good now, guys. I'm sorry. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, like
Prism's actually a little bit like that too right now.
Mm-hmm.
I guess if I had to rephrase the point, not that I really need to, I think we understand, but if you're a solid player and you feel you can reasonably pick up most decks, it's probably not going to be Dromai the one that you pick up. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's so many mini games to that.
Like, wouldn't it be easier to bring Victor to a big tournament and try to like play your fundamentals and get value out of Victor? Even Bravo?
Yeah, because the value you get from like blocking with the Clash card is a lot easier than to like know when to take damage and build a board of dragons to like take tempo back, or block completely, maybe Arsenal like your best dragon and pitch some other stuff for the second cycle. Things that just other decks like really don't have to worry about all that much.
Yeah.
And just so we're clear, I'm not saying Guardian is easy. I do think it's maybe easier than Illusionist.
Nothing's fucking easy.
Right.
Flesh and Blood.
Everything in Flesh and Blood is hard.
I also want to say Dromai very much in the meta acted as a gatekeeper too, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like, you had to be able to deal with dragons to beat Dromai. And that meant that you either needed enough easy go again, like Ninja just having go again on every single attack, or Dash having the ability to shoot pistol twice pretty much every single turn by running maybe 1 or 2 extra blues. Or just having enough poppers, like Brute and Guardian. They just, half their deck is poppers, so it's really easy for them to pop a dragon in their turn. And if you couldn't do one of those two things, if you couldn't deal with the dragons, you just kind of couldn't play in the meta because there's always going to be a Dromai, and that Dromai is always going to beat you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think like perhaps one of the most gatekeepy heroes in the game. I know I've heard stories about like old Prism gatekeeping out Guardian, like Oldhim, for example. Like Oldhim got really strong after Prism rotated out, but I feel like Dromai gatekeeps out worse decks, you know?
Yeah, I mean, hey, we're talking about Teklo and Riptide finally getting some wins in the competitive season right after Dromai leaves. Those were both decks that had a lot of issues playing into Dromai.
And those decks in particular also had other big notable bad matchups. Like I think Teklovossen has a really hard time against Kano, so does Riptide. And Teklovossen has a hard time against Ninja, like really go fast aggro decks.
Sure.
I think.
But definitely saying like one of their worst matchups leaving the field and all of a sudden now they can like, it's more manageable for them. I think it says a lot. So I want to ask, was Dromai a problem? Yes or no? Was she negative to Flesh and Blood?
I would say yes, mostly because Illusionist a lot of the times feels like the ultimate gatekeeper for a lot of the same issues, and I'll talk about that more a bit in Yellow Pitch. But overall, I think how much it reduces the playing field is not like what LSS wanted for Dromai, I don't think, and it's not really healthy for the game. And I feel like decks like Riptide and Arachne, or Assassin in general, like the decks that struggled against Dromai, they deal with the decks at the top of the meta, like Brute and Warrior, really well, but they just couldn't do their job as like counter picks because they were always gatekept by Dromai. So as long as there's Illusionist to keep doing the same gatekeeping, it's gonna have like a meta that it hasn't reached its full potential in terms of playability for all heroes.
Sure. But is that Illusionist or is that Dromai?
I think it's both. Because I think Dromai sort of redefined Illusionist, and it's also like what I think LSS intends is that it's going to be the last version of, or the last of this iteration of Illusionist, where it's just like super value oriented and board state.
So I do really want to jump off that, but first I want to turn to you, Fuzzy, and get your take. Was Dromai a problem? Was Dromai a net negative for Flesh and Blood?
I think she had a lot of really polarizing matchups. I don't like to see that a whole lot in the game. I wish we could have a like more flexible game where every hero has game into the others. I think Dromai really walled out some people. And there's definitely some nuance to that. I'm oversimplifying to make a point, but I don't think there are a lot of other heroes that have that sort of dynamic where by being popular, they delegitimize a portion of the options that you have to come to a tournament with, you know?
So Dromai like was not Prism, right? I think that's pretty notable. When you look at Dromai's design, I think they really looked at what they did with OG Prism, and they realized that they made a lot of mistakes. I think they fixed a lot of those mistakes.
I would agree with that.
Like, I think that a lot of the Spectro and that was inherent to how they expected Illusionists to play did go away. And I think Dromai only really ran the one Spectra card.
Passing
Mirage. I think that dragons being able to be attacked and you to continue on with your turn gave a lot more heroes a lot more play into dealing with the board state in a way that wasn't really present against the original Prism. And I think that the ability to end the Illusionist's turn by blocking with a 6-powered card was really, really big. And I think that they realized if there was no counterplay that Dromai had into that, if there wasn't a passing Mirage, if there weren't Mirror Guys, if there weren't Chrome Eyes, then it would have felt horrible to play her. Maybe they went a little overboard with how much play they gave Dromai into those matchups. But I would definitely say that, like, it was a lot healthier
Yeah.
of a game plan for Illusionists.
Although notably, that wasn't your question.
It wasn't. It was it a net negative? And I think, no. I think more people got something out of Dromai than people lost with Dromai being there.
I do think there were a lot of positives to her design. Like, the way that they handled the board state was the closest to being fair that we've seen so far. And it was really cool. Like, a bunch of badass dragons. Like, aesthetically, Dromai was really cool. And I think she added a lot to the game.
For sure. And I will agree with Clark. Like, it is a step in the right direction for Illusionists. Like, the fact that you couldn't interact with, like, Phantasmal Footsteps on any of your dragons was a huge plus, in my opinion, like, design-wise. But you're right. They did give a lot of tools to make, like, the whole Phantasm stop your turn thing, like, not really an issue. And I'm going to save my next few critiques of Dromai and the yellow pitch. But ultimately, I think, like, what they tried to do with Dromai and Illusionist was, like, a step in the right direction, but ultimately still miss the mark. I think they're still figuring out how much power they can give these Illusionists. And even with, like, Prism 2.0, like, they're still tweaking it. Like, there's a lot of, like, inherently just bad designs floating around.
Yeah. I think that the access to Ultimate Go Again is sort of why James White has said, this is the last Fab 1.0 hero, right? And, like, very much the last hero that they're expecting to see go when they're talking about the too easy source of Go Again. The ability to play any red card, even defensive ones, and then turning on Go Again for all your dragons, it made having a popper too important. And so those, even if you, like, could run some poppers to have the counterplay, now you definitely needed two of them in a turn. I think it just became too much. And I think that they recognize that. I think that we've also seen the new Prism, despite the new Prism getting wins and looking very, very strong, I still think they're constantly moving in the right direction with these Illusionists. If they print Dromai again, I expect them to keep moving in that direction, making it a little bit harder to build up the impossible to deal with board states and giving strong counterplay.
We can only hope. Please, James White, listen to your critiques for once.
But I am going to take a moment here at the end of the pitch to shout out another thing that I loved about Dromai's design, which was that the board state wasn't just a card in hand. It was a card in hand with another resource that you needed on the board. Ash.
Yeah.
Now, it was fairly easy for a lot of Dromais to create a lot of Ash, especially once the Royal Tome of Imperial Flame happened, which I still don't think was a complete misstep. Yes, it was a big power card for Dromai, but it took away the ability for her to have any other headpiece. She now had to lock into this one. It just also did a lot for her, you know? But even still, having to have Ash to play your dragons, your most efficient hands would be the zero-cost dragons that then don't let you create more Ash, so you're going Ash negative on a lot of these turns. Rake the Embers, again, you're going Ash negative on the turn. All of those things meant that you had to make sure that you were pitching red cards, which is ineffectual, in order to put the power and the board state down. Again, I think players made it a little too easy. I think that they found the ways around it. It wasn't as much of a hindrance as it could have been. But I've definitely won some games against Dromais just because they didn't have enough Ash to build the board state that they needed.
Right. I liked Ash as a resource system.
So at the end of the day, was Dromai broken? I don't think she really was. I think she is indicative of the early growing pains and design pains of Flesh and Blood, especially around a complicated class like Illusionist. But I would say, no, she wasn't. Now let's go into all the things that were wrong about Dromai in our yellow pitch. Joel, I hand it to you.
Thank you, Clark. So as we've already hinted at in the previous section, both Illusionists have had some of the most polarizing matchups that we can think of. Mostly with the action point starved classes like Ranger did okay. Like Azalea can kind of power through some of the Dromais. It's happened before at least. But Assassin, Warrior, Guardian, at least with like OG Prism, struggled against Illusionists. And obviously like Teklovossen was like super gate kept. So I wanted to start off this pitch with an open question. That being, is this LSS's like intention to tax action points as a form of control? Because we've talked about like what really is a control deck, and we've also talked about how everything's a mid-range deck, and I think Dromai can fit both of those, same as Illusionist. But I'm wondering if this was always the intent, because it seems like all three, because Prism's technically a new one. All three Illusionists play with some form of like, I need all of your action points to deal with what I just put on the board. How are you going to respond? And do you have the capability in your hero to do that? And also, follow up, how will it be different from Spectra in the future if this is like the designated design space for Illusionist?
I would kind of agree that Dromai feels a little bit like a control hero. At the very least, she's a late game dominator that puts other control heroes out of the market by putting off such a show of force if you allow her the time and the space to build up her board state. And that's kind of how we defined control in the past, right? Control wants the game to go long. And generally, Dromai likes that.
Because all of her dragons are like, they get multiplicative in value. Like how much value they bring you, the longer that you leave them on. Like even one Ashwing, if it's there for like 5 turns, that's 5 points of value from like, I don't know, fucking Billowing Mirage or something. Like something just like off the kilter.
Yeah. It's we talked about this a little bit in episode 20, where we talked about meta bottom feeders with Anthony Pham. In that episode, one of the things that we discussed was reactive versus proactive game plans. And a proactive game plan is forcing your opponent to have to respond to you. Dromai did that probably better than anybody else in the game.
Yeah, and I think Prism also tried to do something similar in the Lexi meta. I was hearing grumblings that people would basically like take all the damage and then just shove like 2 or 3 auras, like really impactful auras like Genesis or something, and then slowly build value like that. The problem is Dromai did that way better. And the really skilled Dromai players knew exactly when and what dragons to shove on the board when the damage maybe isn't or is inconsequential or isn't disruptive enough. So like if I, as a warrior, have like my quote unquote pop off turn and I threaten like 12 with like a copper or something, that really isn't enough to stop Dromai from just saying, okay, that's cool. I'm now going to shove like Yindarai, Nekria, and Miragai, and you have to deal with all of these, not even in the same turn. And while you're doing this, I'm going to be building more. Like it's just, they're okay with doing that to decks that just don't have the power scaling to really make the Dromai want to block that much.
And I like the way you phrased it earlier, like taxing action points as the form of control. You're not just giving up an action point to attack a dragon or a Spectra Aura. You're also giving up an attack, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Like if you could just use your go again on a Spectra and still have the action point, it would be a completely different game, a completely different conversation. But you can't just end your turn attacking a Spectra Aura a lot of the time. So much in the game is built on finishing with something strong, right? Think like Payload from Mechanologist, where it has Dominate. If you've already boosted, it's a turn ender. Or any of the ninja combo finishers. You don't want to give that to Illusionist, right?
Right. Or like with Warrior, and I'm only bringing this up because Warrior's pretty relevant right now, but the like both of my swings with weapons, like the first one, I can't swing into a Spectra because then I don't get to reset Dynamo. I don't get to like play Go again or anything like that. And if I swing at the second one, that's usually the bigger attack. And I can't waste that on a Spectra. So like I need to like sneak in a third hit, and that's usually really hard sometimes, especially if they have like some damage prevention or they block me out. So it gets really messy for a lot of decks that just don't have the ability to go like 3 or 4 wide and not really care which one or what attack you throw into a Spectra.
Yeah. Which is why I think what you're really seeing now is that they're not printing any more Spectra, and they're putting Ward on everything. All the Illusionist auras that we see coming out now all have Ward on them. The new Prism Angels have Ward on them. We've talked about this a couple times on the podcast. I can keep attacking you, and I will still be able to deal with your board state. Now, I don't know if there's a way for them to do that with dragons. They can't just say, now we have Ash Plus, right? And the new Dromai only makes Ash Plus, where all the dragons also have Ward 1. Like, I don't think that's going to be the case, right?
Yeah, I don't think so either. And that kind of boils into my next point, talking about how like board states are like inherently toxic to Flesh and Blood. Mostly because what I considered all of Dromai's dragons like mini sigil of solaces. Because like every card you spend to attack into a dragon is a card you're not spending to attack in a Dromai. So there's no way for you to effectively clear any of the dragons while also pressuring life total. And that's where like this massive tempo disparity comes in. And you'll get like these insane swing of dragons and you just lose from there.
Well, then here's a question for you, Joel. Would it have been better if all of the dragons just had like 1 less power and attack? Like, what if Chromai was 2 power, 1 health? Miragai was 1 power, 3 health. Would that have made them more balanced? Simply by cutting their numbers down, by expecting them to gain more value over multiple turns?
I think for the most part, all of the health thresholds and power thresholds are fine. What were you saying?
I see what you're saying, Clark, about how would a fine tuning of the numbers make a big difference? And I feel inclined to say no, because Dromai at the very beginning of the game wasn't that good. It took a long time for us to figure out how strong Dromai is as a player base. Not me personally. But I think it's a fundamental aspect of what tools different heroes have. Like the classes that Joel mentioned earlier, Ranger, Assassin, Warrior, Guardian. Like, if I have a dragon with 2 health, hopefully, for my opponent, he has a 2 attack thing to deal with it. If he doesn't, he's gaining extra value, or I'm gaining extra value. If he only has an attack for 5, he's wasting 3 power, right? I didn't gain 2 health, I gained 5, and he had to deal with it soon. He can't wait for that 2 power attack to roll around. So
well, here's kind of what I'm saying about the numbers change. Is 1, by reducing the numbers, you can make it easier for more classes to have tools that will deal with it. For example, look at all the generic 0 for 3s with Go Again if you put them in Arsenal. Right? Now all those 4 health dragons being 3 health dragons, easier to deal with.
I think it makes it marginally better, but I don't know if it's drastic enough to make it not as detrimental for these decks. Like the point is like you're spending cards for these dragons when you're not pressuring life total. So in that way, you can kind of get fatigue because Dromai also has attack actions or fatter dragons where you need to commit multiple cards. So like I don't know at what threshold of health or power differences make it like less toxic.
Well, when it comes to power differences, the reason why I mentioned that one specifically is because it makes it less valuable for the Dromai to play their like block 9, play a sigil, swing for 10, right? Now they're not swinging for 10. If each one of those dragons are attacking for 1 or 2 less damage, it's less on the crackback. And it takes a lot longer for that playstyle to actually bear any fruit. And if I'm being aggro enough, I can still put the pressure on the Dromai and deal with them. AKA, you brought up the multiplicative value. I am saying by reducing the power number specifically, you can really reduce the decimal point that's being multiplied there.
Yeah. I definitely see where you're going.
I agree that like having all the dragons be weaker would make them be less strong. Like, I'm not arguing against that. But I still think it has to do with the mechanics of the game. Like, I guess my proposal off the top of my head would be like, give all your attacks on allies trample. Like, if I attack an Ashwing for 1 with an attack for 7 with an on-hit, like, I would say let the extra 6 damage go to the actual defending hero that controls that ally, and also let them defend over the ally.
Yeah.
So the first damage will always hit the ally. But for that extra 6, any blocking cards that they declare can go against it. This way, it just integrates allies more seamlessly with the fundamentals of the game. So when Guardian has these big fuck all attacks, he actually gets to still play big fuck all attacks and attack the dragons. Now, maybe I recognize this is weakening the dragons, so we can give them more numbers, but at least it integrates them in with the fundamental aspects of the game.
And that does change currently how allies are interacting. That's a rules change, which I would say is something that LSS could do.
I agree with that because I feel like Dromai and her allies don't play Flesh and Blood. They're playing an entirely different game and forcing every deck in the format to dedicate sideboard slots for this specific hero, for this specific play style, in a way that just did not translate well enough to like exist the way it.
Because some heroes literally can't play that game.
Yeah, and I don't think this like sort of design space the way it is now should, like, even with like cell swords. I mean, allies in general should just have a massive rules overhaul. I think that's like the crux of the issue.
And I'll still concede it's better than the Spectre stuff we had before.
For sure.
Yeah.
Like I said, they're still working on Illusionists. They have a long way to go, but there's ways around it for sure. So now that Dromai's gone, we still have Prism. You know, she still plays with the same exact mechanics as Dromai, to some different effect, being allies through these angels. They're all like 4 power, 4 health. They have ward on them, so they're a little bit harder to defend. It plays more with like your trample idea, Clark, where you have to block your life total in order to keep your angels around if they're not attacked directly. But there's also heralds and still your Spectre cards. So I'm wondering, with this new Prism, like, are these stopgaps enough to prevent Prism from not having like another like huge gate kept meta, like stopping the assassins, the warriors, and the Teklos to have meta share? Like, she has 8 less health, a lot more non-blocks, and like technically a worse weapon, quote unquote. But I'm wondering, like, is this enough to make this like playstyle easy to deal with, I guess?
I certainly think so. I know that right now the ALS loop is like the boogeyman of Flesh and Blood, and like everyone can't stop freaking out about this. It really is kind of terrifying. One, like it is a terrifying thing to see happen.
Yeah.
And like that can even exist in this game. It's something that you would almost always expect in in Magic the Gathering, but like this is in Flesh and Blood. My Flesh and Blood? What the fuck is this doing here? This belongs in other games.
True.
But I would say that there is enough present to where it's not complete doomer mentality. Like, I still think a lot has to go right for the Prism in these moments, and I think that if you're aware of it, if you know it's going to be there are sideboard slots that you can dedicate that will save you.
For sure.
I also just think that I'm of Brian Go's mentality, which is that some polarizing matchups are okay for the game. The only way you will have a perfectly balanced game is if both people are playing the exact same hero with the exact same deck list, drawing the exact same card. Like, and even then, drawing different cards makes things inherently unbalanced. Oh, we're both playing the exact same KO list, but I drew Blood Rush first, so I guess I win. Like, no, that you need to... It's not perfectly skilled. You're not going to have a perfect 50-50. So then everyone wants, oh, well, it's 60-40. Never go beyond 60-40. But like, where do you actually end up drawing that line?
Sure.
I think it's fine that there are polarizing matchups in the game. And I think that if you know that you're going to have the polarizing matchup, you just kind of know it. It's either going to be gem luck or you dedicate some inventory slots. I think it feels bad right now because we're in such an open meta. So like, you're constantly having to like dedicate slots to so many things in your inventory. But like, I think it's a natural progression of the game that it's going to happen. And there's a lot more interplay here.
Yeah, I still disagree. I was saying earlier that I don't like how polarizing these matchups are in the game. I feel like they can make some small adjustments here and there in their design philosophy to make the game more fair for people who want to play whatever heroes. And I'm not saying that every hero has to be like meta viable, but like, man, there's certain ones that seem to be the worst offenders for keeping other strategies out of the game. And to an extent, that's an okay thing. I kind of think Dromai went a little over the edge there. Not even a lot, but like, it's there.
Yeah, and you know, we don't like to dogpile on this podcast, but I'm also going to disagree with Clark, mostly because...
And Clark's making some great points.
No, he is. I agree. Like, everything you just said was... I do agree to a good extent, but at some point we have to remember Prism's already been LL before, and she has the same card pool, like T for T. And so my thinking is like, if we know that this archetype is strong, this play pattern is strong, now 2 illusionists have LL'd through this play pattern, and there's a third one with the same access to the same cards, minus the weapon, of sure, but it's still like free go again on 2 cards. At some point, you have to just say, okay, we need to ban some of these cards because they're just inherently toxic. What cards get banned is, I'm sure, up for debate, and I'm sure LSS is like contemplating whether or not ALS demands bans.
Yeah.
But Spectra, these allies, and ALS, like all that stuff, it's not healthy for the game. It's already been proven. Printing her twice does not like magically solve everything. You need a bit more intervention from the company, unless you just want an exact repeat of the last 2 illusionists.
I will say I kind of want to recuse myself from the ALS debate right now. I haven't been watching a lot of games with it active. I don't 100% know how easy it is to get out or what the counterplay is, because I haven't been paying that close of attention to the metagame just in the last week or two. So I won't be saying a lot here.
I think one thing that we can say is that we have seen them not print any more Spectra, right? And with the lack of Spectra being printed, and how Dromai barely used Spectra, like, I think that ultimately that's going to be the nexus on how healthy the illusionists are moving forward. Very clearly, they've demonstrated that they are willing to bring in more counterplay to dealing with board states while you're playing your own game plan. AKA, it wasn't just, I think I talked in Red Pitch about proactivity and reactivity. Proactive game plan and making others respond to you, reactive game plan having to respond to the opponent. I think that even if you had a proactive strategy, Dromai made you reactive.
Yes, so true.
And now I think that they are constantly looking to move that needle. And the more often that I can keep doing what I want to do, and I'll deal with your board state, the healthier illusionists are going to get. And I've seen that needle move and keep moving and keep moving. And so every single time I hear somebody doom about illusionists, I think they're just complaining about the now. And that's okay, but I think it's important to remember that that is the conversation that you're having. You're complaining about right now. And if you actually think about the future, it's been nothing but, it has only been positive improvements.
Yeah, I think there's been some massive improvements, massive changes in the design philosophy for illusionists, but it still carries a lot of what made illusionists so problematic in the past like 2 or 3 years of the game. I think that's why people have so many pain points with it. But I'm excited to see what Dromai could look like in the future, and I do like the stopgaps that they added with Dromai and eventually Prism. And before we move on to our last pitch, I want to just quickly bring up, what do you guys think Enigma is going to be like? Is she going to be the new benchmark and a little bit weaker than the illusions that we've seen so far? How is she going to interact with Prism? Any lasting thoughts?
Well, we know from the Q&A that Brian Go and James White did at the Pro Tour Los Angeles this year that it's going to be more of the difficulty in the illusionist matchup will be put on the illusionist player as opposed to the illusionist's opponent. If you think of all those like headache board states that you're looking down, supposedly it'll be like easier to play against this illusionist skill wise. And I don't know what that necessarily means. I don't know if it's just that she's weaker. I don't know if it's just that like there's more going on in her hand that you don't have to deal with, but I'm kind of excited to see what comes out. I'm really excited, honestly.
I mean, I can tell you what I think it's going to be. I think it's going to be a lot like Dromai, only instead of dragons with Phantasm, it's going to be spectral shields. And at the end of the day, that's healthier because rather than Phantasm, it says ward on it. And so I don't need to deal with blocking and like having my deck built a certain way. I just need to make sure I can deal damage to an illusionist player, which isn't the hardest thing in the world.
Yeah, I'm excited to see like the defensive package that Enigma is going to get because all of her offense and defense is going to be through spectral shields. And so support revolving around this mechanic instead of allies is going to be interesting. And especially when all of her like main board like core cards are going to be blue centric and therefore below rate on some of them unless they're like really pushed. So I'm assuming that it's going to be easier to deal with than Prism, but I'm wondering if Prism just also just runs over Enigma in playability as well. But that's all I got for this pitch. Just wanted to quickly touch base on like the other two illusionists board states and how they interact with like the rest of the meta really. Fuzzy, what do you have for us in blue pitch?
All right. I had the responsibility for this episode of offering an alternative for the future. So I wanted to make a couple tweaks for this envisioning of future Dromai and give her some new tools to use in the future.
So James White did say that they will reprint Dromai. Like specifically they are reprinting Dromai and that we will see the dragons return. So I think that's actually really interesting when we get ready for your designs here, Fuzzy, because it means that we're not going to see a radically different dragon illusionist.
Yeah, I will say I was intending for all of the old dragon cards to be played with this new Dromai. So you'll see a lot of the same tools from before, a lot of pieces that'll feel really familiar, but I'm trying to put a little bit of a twist on them. So I want to start with the hero card. Then I'm going to do the weapon, and then a couple of extra cards that I would be adding to her card pool to showcase what I am intending here. So I have named her Dromai, Empress of Ash. Aesthetically, this is Dromai taking advantage of the chaos politically in Volcor and ascending to the throne and becoming the Empress of Volcor. As a callback to the Emperor card, I said Dromai, Empress of Ash, can only play with red cards in your deck. If you're using Dromai, Empress of Ash, you may only have red cards in your deck.
Ooh, kind of like the Emperor.
Exactly. And a lot of Dromai lists already are very red dominant, but this is like completely cutting out the yellows and the blues. So you can't run Passing Mirage, but there's still other red illusionist attacks that you're happy to run.
Lost in Thought.
Also, as a callback to Crown of Dominion, I had her have, at the start of the game, create a gold token. And she is a Royal Draconic Illusionist hero. So she's royal from the get-go. That means you can run Tome of Imperial Flame for free, basically. And you start with your gold, which you can immediately use for pitching to it. I also gave her, the first time you pitch each turn, create an Ash token for each card pitched. So this is strictly worse than her old hero ability that created Ash. Originally, every time you pitch a red card, you make an Ash, but for my design, I want it to be the first time that you pitch cards. Now, if you pitch to a gold token, as an example, you're paying 2 resources to draw a card, so you'd assumedly pitch 2 reds. In that instance, you would make 2 Ash, but that would be your trigger for the turn. You don't get to make other Ash that turn. If the first time you pitch cards in the turn, you're pitching a single card, you're going to make 1 Ash that turn, and you won't have the opportunity to make more.
Notably, for Tome of Imperial Flame, it makes you pitch 2 red, so you would make 2 Ash off of that card.
As long as you haven't pitched before. And her last little ability, when you play a card, the next Draconic attack you control gets Go Again. Again, I see this as a little bit weaker than her old hero ability. If you've played a red card this turn, dragons you control have Go Again while attacking. That was her old ability. Now I say, whenever you play a card, only the next Draconic attack you control gets Go Again. However, I've expanded it not just to Draconic allies you control, but any Draconic attack. So you could give Go Again to your big attacks with Phantasm, or what other Draconic attacks you want. Just nothing generic. But
like that.
But it would still apply to your dragons. So you can't give all your dragons Go Again in the same turn. You have to play a card for each Draconic Go Again attack that you want. And you can still get extra action points with Chromai. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. Chromai would really help this sort of build, but I wanted Dromai to commit more in order to give action points to her entire dragon army.
I like that a lot, Fuzzy. This is a very, very cool design.
I have reeled in her power level a little bit fundamentally, but also given her the tools that come with the Royal Kit, and she starts with a gold token.
What I really like about this flavor-wise is how you are basically allowing Dromai to fix her problem of not having Ash at the beginning of the game by giving her a gold token. And you're also unlocking her head slot so she could actually have a bit more armor. So she could have a bit more pivot turn. She has to, I'm going to wait to hear the rest of your design before I comment the rest of it. But I can see how you'd want more cards in hand to do less of what the old Dromai does. So I think it's a very smart, powering down, but still keeping the flavor of Dromai.
Yeah. It also very notably, I like the draconic focus. It's interesting because only the red cards in the deck. One, I love the flavor of that. Of like the Emperor had it, and now the Empress has it, right? Like it very much feels like it's attached to the crown. And now she has the crown. She's the Emperor. She's the Empress. She has the crown of Dominion on. It doesn't need to be in the head slot. It's just who she is now. So it's kind of cool that you grafted that onto the hero here. I will say that I wonder if the only red cards is too much of a drawback. But notably, you gave this hero 4 intellect and 40 health, where maybe now we're expecting a lot of illusionists to actually have their health reduced when they have a lot of this board state building.
So now I want to talk about her weapon. I've called it Volkor's Ruler. I'm imagining like a nice long scepter that she like holds as she rules, sits atop her throne.
Or measures things. Perhaps a ruler is a literal unit of measurement, and it is the length of the scepter.
As a reminder, her old scepter gave all of her dragons the ability to attack for no resources, as long as it's once per turn. I have a strictly worse version. Dragons you control have, once per turn, pay 1 resource to attack. So literally worse than her old one. You now have to pay 1 resource every time you want to attack with a dragon. This is kind of like the part that fascinates me. Like, so much of the ability to attack with your dragons, whether or not they have go again, how much it costs to attack, how often you get to attack, is all attached to Dromai and her weapon itself. It's not on the dragon card. I'm interested to see if LSS makes any changes there, tweaks the dragons, makes them perhaps less powerful by modifying not the dragons themselves, but the weapon and her hero ability. That's something that I'm finding really fascinating about Dromai. So she has a lot of strictly weaker parts of herself. What does she get in return? I'm imagining she gets to play into the royal aspect a little bit more. And when I think of royal cards, I really believe that LSS isn't going to and shouldn't print any cards that are actually royal in the tagline below. Because I think that can get really confusing. It'll make players think that they can run like this headpiece and then they can run like royal cards like in their deck lists because they have the card that makes you royal. But like, I don't think the rules would work like that because you're not royal until you equip the headpiece. So you wouldn't bring royal cards in your deck list. I think royal is really meant to be a bonus if you choose to be royal in that game.
It's like a talent that isn't a talent.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the space that I'm playing within here. I'm continuing that design trend. Cards like heroes like Emperor and this new Dromai are always royal, so they'll always get this bonus. The first card I want to talk about, I call Crush the Rebellion. It's a red pitch card. All 3 of these cards are going to be red pitch. It costs 0. It is a defense reaction that blocks for 3. It has Mirage, which is a keyword we've seen before, where when it defends a non-illusionist attack with 6 more power, it's destroyed. If you are royal, you also draw a card unless your opponent pays 1 resource. So it's just a really above rate defense reaction, 0 for 3, that taxes your opponent a resource. If you play this at the right time, you can almost certainly draw a card from it, but it also has the drawback of Mirage.
Yeah, I was really interested in the keyword Mirage. We haven't seen really anything yet done with that, and I really liked that design space, like adding the 6 power like weakness to other parts of the illusionist kit while also helping with your, because like I feel like this card versus like ninja would be really strong, or some of the other aggressive decks that like illusionists just struggle into. So I like this design so far.
Yeah, I think the most efficient use of this card is going to be blocking a 0 for 3 go again or something with 3 power go again. Because if you try to block with this card and another card, that other card you're blocking with is probably going to be like a 2 block, because you're not going to block with a Mirage 3 block against a 6 power card. So it's not going to block with something. That's something that kind of occurred to me, that like it's going to shine the most against a go wide deck.
It's also very strong for that because it gets to draw you a card.
But I also like hid that power level behind the opponent having the option to pay an extra resource if they have one. Kind of like a royal king, like Emperor paying collecting attacks from people.
I would say that I would like to see this card actually as a 4 block instead. You know, because if you just sort of think about royal is supposed to be a decent payoff. And actually a 3 block defense reaction with Mirage is a pretty weak card. So like, what is the real payoff that Royal is giving you here? I think I would either rather see maybe a steeper cost, maybe unless they pay 2 resources.
Sure.
Or it have a little bit more block value behind it.
It could probably be a little stronger.
But drawing a card is also kind of cracked. I mean, we've seen...
Yeah, you put it at the end of a chain link. Like if they end with something for 0 for 4, you just kind of stick that in there, block 3 damage, and draw a card. I think it has a lot of potential to like, blow out. But it could probably still get a little bit more bonus. My next card is called Keep Your Enemies Closer. It's a red pitch that costs 1. It's a 5 power attack that blocks for 3. And when it attacks, create an Ash token. Your opponent creates a Ponder token. And when this hits, if you are Royal, destroy all cards in the defending hero's arsenal.
I love the way that this, and we've seen this with other cards in Illusionists, like Lost in Thought and Dissolve Reality, where they like destroy something of yours, but they give you a little gift. They give you a Ponder token.
I probably could have given this card Phantasm, but I felt like a 1 for 5 attack is fair. And we've already seen like Sweeping Blow, which is a 1 for 3 that makes an Ash that doesn't have Phantasm. So I felt like there was enough design space in Draconic Illusionist that I didn't have to give it to it. But I could see it for sure.
Yeah.
Especially when like this card is threatening like 5 damage, and in order to keep your arsenal, you have to give it 2 cards, but then you get 1 back. I don't know. I feel like it kind of like plays on the line of like, your opponent definitely has to think about this card, but there's a lot of ways it could go.
It adds a lot of interaction that I enjoy.
Yeah. I also really like that it makes an Ash token.
Yes.
You very, very clearly limited the ability to create Ash for this hero. And so I think it's going to be very important for Dromai, Empress of Ash, to find other ways in her deck list of making Ash tokens. There certainly do exist out there, but a lot of the times they have Phantasm, or like only if they're popped, or only if they hit. This is one that says, look, if you play this, you're getting an Ash.
Right.
I really appreciate that.
Yeah, there's cards like Billowing Mirage and is it Sweeping Blow? But those are strong. But I think, like Clark said, because of the higher difficulty to create Ash on a turn-by-turn basis, having more cards like this to start off your turn to get something else go again and get more Ash, super cool design.
I definitely wanted to give Dromai a little bit more.
Yeah,
Not to mention, don't forget that we can give this go again if we play a card before it.
true.
It's possible, yep. And it costs 1, so you're probably making an Ash on the back end anyway when you're pitching to play it.
But what's the easiest 0 cost that you could probably play in this play style to give it go again? Probably a 0 cost dragon, which means you still need to start your turn with an Ash to really fully utilize this card.
So the last card I want to talk about here is called I Bow to No Other Will. It's a red pitch that costs 1, and it says this card's cost cannot be modified in any zone. If you are Royal, this card has go again. It's a 5 power, 2 block. It's a draconic action, not illusionist. So Emperor could play this card. And my idea here was just that like I was designing an all red hero, and I was like, when ice comes back, this hero will be shit. So I wanted to give one tool to help it combat like things like frostbite tokens, where if you play this through a frostbite token, its cost can't be modified, so it ignores the frostbite, and then the frostbite still goes away. And it's a 1 for 5 go again if you're Royal. That's still pretty playable in a lot of situations. And it gives your next draconic attack go again because it is a card in of itself. So
yeah, no, I absolutely love this. They will have to deal with frostbite the moment that ice is back in the meta, and they will need a lot of tools to deal with this.
And flavor-wise, I love the idea of Dromai being like, what? Nah, I ain't paying your frostbite tax.
I'm the Empress.
I'm
not
Empress.
paying your tax. You pay me taxes.
Yeah, she levies. She don't get levied.
I bow to no other will.
I like it.
Those are my designs.
No, I really like this design. I love the inclusion of Emperor being able to use cards like this. I love the powering down of Dromai and adding some stuff of her kit that like Dromai players have been doing like since the card was released in Crown of Dominion. Like that was pretty much a staple. So I like what it unlocks. I like what it iterates on. Super cool design.
Yeah. I think you really looked at what they did with Prism Advent of Thrones and took a lot of inspiration from it. And I love that because it makes me feel like this is very grounded and very possible to happen, right? I think it's also just a killer flavor win.
Yes.
And whenever they're reprinting a hero, especially a hero that has LL'd, If you're going to give us the same hero with the same name, I expect that hero's story to move forward.
Yeah.
And so making her the Empress does that. It really moves the story forward. And I think you found the right tools to give that flavor to the hero. I'm slightly concerned that this hero might just not be playable at all. Because the Emperor is kind of only viable because he can like randomly deal 10 damage at instant speed, right?
Well, he also starts
In
with 15
Blitz.
health, and he doesn't have support very much. Like, he was just a proof of concept that they shipped out, and he's playable, he's viable, but if, like, they actually printed some cards specifically for the Emperor to be strong, like, I get what you're saying, though. Like, in an ice meta or in an arcane meta, like, this hero is lacking some tools.
Look, people like Zachary Wallach played Dromai not because she was the best at anything, but because they loved dragons. Like, just being able to play with dragons. And obviously she's like hot or whatever, so I'm sure people would like that too. So like any iteration of Dromai will probably do really well. Same with Prism.
I'm not saying that this hero won't be popular. I'm saying I wonder how much dragon is actually viable in this hero. With how hard it is to get Ash and with how hard it is to give those dragons go again. Both of those are things that I think are levers that LSS can pull on. And I think you've pulled both. I feel like LSS may only pull one.
Yeah, it's definitely going for more of like a proof of concept there. Like, hey, did you think about maybe this could be
Yeah.
a tweak in the future?
Definitely. I mean, I really like the things that you did. The next Draconic attack gains go again. That's damn cool.
And if you think you can do better, feel free to drop your designs or your concepts in our custom card designs channel in our Discord. We'd love to hear what you think Dromai should have when she is eventually returns, or maybe a new Draconic Illusionist if you're kind of sick of the whole dragon thing.
And we also do a discussion thread in our Discord for each episode that comes out, so we'd love to hear your thoughts there too.
Oh yeah.
Okay, with all that being said, I think it's time to move on to our Arsenal Zone.
So listeners, if you've never heard this part of the show before, because we haven't done it in a while, the Arsenal Zone is where we take a moment to talk about a card, whether that be a card that we like, a card that we hate, or a card that we like to hate. Either way, each of us are going to pick a card, and we're going to start off with Clark, because he has one written down.
Sure. So this is a card I've been thinking a lot about. For one, I'm moving off of Leviah. I've been playing a lot of Leviah at a lot of AGEs and a lot of small tournaments and a lot of armories, and I feel like I'm hitting a wall.
Yeah.
Of just, I'm not learning anymore. I'm just kind of struggling with Leviah. And I want to grow when I play Flesh and Blood. I am moving on to KO.
Let's fucking go.
I mean, I have all the pieces. I have all the brute cards. It's easy. He's there. I pulled the Marvel when I was at...
You're big ups.
I'm big ups.
What a departure.
I know. It's almost like it's fine to play other heroes in your class. All right, it's been too long not talking about my card. I don't like it when we do that. It makes the video edit weird. I'm talking about Massacre. I think Massacre is a really great card. I think it's really underrated right now in KO. I think what a lot of players are kind of missing, they're missing the forest through the trees when they build KO a lot of the time. I don't think they're actually looking at what makes KO strong. And KO is strong because you get to run a lot of blues, which means all of your 3-cost attacks are really good now. And you can also discard cards really reliably, even when you randomly flip them off the top. So when you have a card that costs 3 and is really good even if you discard it, you should be running that card. It is just exactly what KO wants. And I know that Savage Sash is coming out, and that's probably going to turn KO into an absolute combo beast. Like, just have one massive fuck-all turn where I'm going to deal 30 plus damage to you. I think Massacre really works into the current mid-rangey plan that we have right now with Findalls. If I'm able to use Findalls to just get that one extra resource and make it easier to, say, throw a 2-cost Go Again into a Claw, into this, I think that's a really, really powerful turn that not a lot of people are going to be able to deal with and come back from. I mean, this could be a 3 for 8 Intimidate. They're going to leak a lot of damage from that.
And on a like at the end of a Blood Rush turn, you like that's just insane value right there because you're guaranteeing that 10 damage.
Yeah. So I think Massacre is very impactful, seems extremely strong in KO. I've been goldfishing with it. I've been doing some online testing. It looks strong. I just kind of need to get my act together, build the deck, and take it to an armory and really start showing people what's what.
I'm excited.
Oh yeah. I for one am proud of you for finally moving off of Levi. This is a position that I find myself in like last year or like around Nats when
Around every 4 months, I'd say.
Yeah, around every 4 months. Thanks. No, but like I get it, dude. Like eventually, like you just want to stop succumbing to the variant and have a bit more agency. And Levi is just she's super strong. She's just still not there in terms of like just not randomly losing.
I mean, look, this isn't what this section is supposed to be about. It's supposed to be about the card.
You brought it up.
I know.
Just kidding.
But I will say that for me, it's not that I think Levia is bad. I need to move off her and like you shouldn't play Levia. That's not it at all. If you ask me my opinions on Levia, I think she's extremely strong. People should be playing her. She's one of the most fun heroes in this game, and she is very meta relevant right now. All of those are true things about Levia. The thing is that I didn't feel like I was continuing to learn and grow on the hero. And when you hit that wall, look to move off it. Maybe I'll return to Levia next season.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
In about like 4 months.
Look, let me start playing KO first.
Is it my turn?
Yeah.
All right. The card that I'm shouting out today is Time Skippers.
Ooh.
Oh.
So I think this card is really interesting because it's this trash common from Monarch that also happens to do one thing reasonably well, and it's the only card that does that thing. And that's relevant right now in the meta because we have this hero that demands you to have multiple action points or else you don't get to play the game. Time Skippers is an equipment that sits there on the field until you need it. It gives you those 2 action points for 3 resources, and you get to keep playing the game.
Yep.
And that's wild. This card does not look good. I would not be happy that I have to run this card, except if it wins me the game and like gets me out of an ALS loop, then it is pretty good. And I would be happy to play it in that situation. It's just kind of wild to me that this card is seeing play. And I love that we play a game where it can shift around so much that some random common equipment from 5 sets ago can, like 8 sets ago, can be relevant and playable and viable.
Yep.
That card is just good, man.
And also as a sideboard tool, as a counterplay, like a hate card, if you will, having it be an equipment makes it specifically like low variance because it's there when you need it for that one situation. And I think that kind of makes it like better designed than something like Lead the Charge, which is something you need to have in your hand when the time comes.
Yes, very much so.
But at the cost of whatever the fuck you were putting your feet in before.
Like Valiant Dynamos. I don't know. That's
Right.
pretty steep.
But I think like Katsu might be able to make it work because his legs are really nice though. They really allow him to combo off. I don't know. It's something I've been thinking about lately. Oh, and I brought a copy for each of you that I'm going to sign and hand over to my luscious fellow hosts.
Luscious. Hey, yo. This is great though, because I actually needed a Time Skippers. So today I wanted to talk about Fractal Replication, which is a red pitch majestic from Everfest. It costs 0. It's an illusionist attack action with no attack or defense values. And it says, it's a lot of text, so bear with me. It says, when you play or defend with Fractal Replication, it gains the base abilities of all illusionist attack action cards on the combat chain, and it gets power equal to the greatest base amongst illusionist attack actions on the combat chain, and it also gains defense equal to the greatest base among illusionist attack actions you control on the combat chain. And I wanted to bring this up because I have no idea what the use case here is. Because, like, if you play it in Prism, not only is it not a yellow pitch, it doesn't block for shit unless you block with another Herald that you theoretically would like to keep. But if any of your Heralds hit, this has no attack value because when it goes to soul, it's technically not on the combat chain anymore. So I'm like 99% sure that it wouldn't work. So I'm like, okay, so you have to kind of hope that they don't block, or that they block and don't let a herald hit, which is just, it just seems like a weird nombo to me. So I'm really hoping Enigma fleshes out this card a little bit, because it's still, I'm like really struggling to see like what they were thinking when they printed this card.
There was actually a really funny instance. So I've started following the judges of Wraith. Twitter.
I saw that too.
Yeah. And so they had this really fun little experiment with this card specifically, where they attacked with, I think, Phantasmaclasm, where you could name a card and make it illusionist. And they named Thunderquake. And then the opposing victor blocked with a red Thunderquake. And then they followed up, because they had Go Again on it somehow, with the Fractal Replication. And because Thunderquake is considered illusionist from the Phantasmaclasm, it was a 0 for 10.
What?
Yeah.
This card is super like rules trippy.
Yeah.
Because it was considered illusionist and it's on the combat chain.
Oh.
Yeah.
That is interesting. That's really cool. Very confusing. Very cool.
Yeah.
It was like a judge pop quiz, you know? Like this is confusing. What do you think is going on here? And then everyone can chime in with like, I think this is how it would play out.
I've been doing pretty good on those.
Well, you are a level 0 judge.
Yeah.
I am level 0.
That's higher than level
-1.
nothing. Yeah, -1.
That's higher than I didn't bother taking the test.
If you clashed with a player who hadn't bothered to take the test, you would win the clash.
Yeah,
0 is more than nothing.
Yep.
That's exactly
We're just
right.
full of nuggets on this podcast. That's it for my card, though. Mine's short and sweet.
Thank you so much for listening, everyone. It's been a pleasure. Say goodbye, you two.
Bye.
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 Pitch It To Me podcast is hosted by Fuzzy Delp, Clark Moore, and Joel Recinos. Our executive producer is Talon Stradley. Music by Dillon Hulse. Logo by Han V. And sound mixing by Christopher Moore. Last but not least, we'd like to thank you, the listener. Thank you for tuning in. Please give us a follow on your favorite social media platform at Pitch It To Me podcast. Which is that I have sold a fuzzy signed card.
Shut the fuck up. Did you really?
Yeah. Marcus Brown needed a crippling crush.
Oh
and
my.
I was looking through my trade binder and he saw the fuzzy signed one and he goes, would you trade me a fuzzy signed card? And I was like, maybe. What's the value of a fuzzy signed card?
My man Clark, he upcharged for it.
No way. I upcharged for it.
What'd you charge it for it?
There's 2 of these in the world.
Bro, you're
What do you
joking,
mean?
bro. I can't believe you.
What do you mean?
He made me proud in the weirdest way. So do I get a grade?
I would say, what's the highest grade? Like A+ or S?
Highest would be S+.
Triple S.
Triple S.
Like the golden fighting game. Like
Mario Kart ratings.
I was gonna say, what are the Tekken ranks are all like God Killer. Galaxy Annihilator.
Yeah, I would give this like an 8 from 1 to like Galaxy Annihilator.
Cool, I'll take it. Using her powers to rule with an iron fist or what have you, I definitely imagine her being a pretty tough person to abide by.
She, girl boss, she does gaslight, gatekeep, girl boss.
I think I was trying not to say that.
I would say of all of the heroes,
She's not, like,
I
walking.
would trust Prism to bathe more than like Kasai.
Whoa. Not Clark showing his true colors on the pod. This is
I'm just
recorded too,
saying,
jackass.
actually,
One
really
of
agree
these
with that.
people.
Whoa!
I'm just saying, one of these people
We're really
lives
playing on the
in
2
a
white, 1
city,
brown today, aren't we?
is
Christ
rich,
almighty.
She's like a part of the religion. Do you know how many religions have things with like clean feet? At least one.
Okay.